When you set out to gut a 90-year-old kitchen, you have to be prepared for the occasional unforeseen challenge, or as we like to call it, rot. See, the contractor guy explained, as though talking to two small, dim-witted children, water is the enemy of wood. I was afraid he was going to say, "Now say it after me," just like my 8th grade science teacher did. Water, it turns out, hates wood like Trump hates Rosie. The two spend entire decades fighting inside your walls until one day a big, noisy tool exposes them just like a deputy holding a flashlight and shining it into the back seat when you're parked at the junior high ball field. Oh, sorry, where was I? We had a crackerjack team working on our old house. There was Daryl and Damon and Donnie Ray and Dion, the head guy. It's a D thing, try to understand. Each morning the boys would roll up in assorted trucks, fumble for a cigarette or 10, and walk up and down looking at the rear of the house. They'd always shake their heads, calling to mind the country expression I grew up with that applied to times when Aunt Elna J. or whomever had the cancer. In the rural South, the cancer surgery is always followed by a report from some kin proclaiming that they opened Elna J. up, but when they took a look at her insides, well, they just sewed her right back up. It's dramatic, always accompanied by a stitching in the air motion, and it never fails to elicit a chorus of "I Swanee," or even a hushed "Sweet Jesus" or two. This is how the D team looked at the kitchen addition and renovation. Even the prospect of a complete demo of the 90-year-old kitchen wasn't enough to cheer them up. It was a gargantuan task ahead of them, not made any easier by the first day's revelation that a very large, dead rat would have to be dealt with when they pried up some boards. Daryl promptly threw up his barbecue sandwich and sundrop, and I realized that this was a sensitive bunch. I came to know the crew and the many sub-crews very well, and they, in turn, got to know me well. I adored these men and wished that I could have fed them biscuits and gravy every day. But since I no longer had any semblance of a kitchen, that was pretty much impossible. After 3 months of male bonding, I'd gotten used to the house crawling with men whose names began with D. Everything was going great. That is, until one very unfortunate morning. You see, I thought they'd all gone in their mini trucks to the lumberyard to fetch wood to replace the challenge section of the day. Alone, at last, and happily wandering in robe and slippers from room to room in my suddenly silent house, I let slip an ill wind, so to speak. It is not an exaggeration to say that it was so loud and resonant as to threaten the very newly poured foundation of my kitchen. Rebar, schmebar, something's gonna blow. And then it happened. On the other side of a thin piece of plywood that had been nailed up to protect the rest of the house from lung-clogging mountains of dust, I heard an embarrassed shuffling of feet and fake coughing. Oh, precious Lord, take me now. And no, it matters not a whit that kings and queens do it. How could I have been so reckless? They always leave at least one man behind in case a new episode of rot breaks out. I realize that this confession may startle those of you who assume that a Southern flower such as myself would be incapable of committing such a vile act, but I can only be perfectly truthful with y'all and say that there is a first time for everything. I've known many men over the years who claim never to have heard their wives expel anything noisy from their bodies other than perhaps an excited and grateful squeal during lovemaking. But these men have no idea what happens when they finally clear out and these women can at last behave as nature intended. People, we are human. As I stood, frozen in horror and shame, I was filled with regret for the previous night's dinner. For just as water and wood are a really bad combination, so are a fish sandwich and cheddar pepper poppers from Sonic. I couldn't be sure, but I thought the D team was looking at me differently over the next few weeks. A few of them began to loudly burp as though to make me feel more comfortable in my own home. Their motives were pure and primal, I suppose. It's like in the wild when one animal does something to indicate to the other that they can be friends. It would have been inappropriate for us to sniff one another's naughties, so this was the best they could do to let me know that they understood we were all human beings full of hopes and dreams and flatulence.